Welcome to another episode of the Lords of Consciousness podcast, aka Videocast, as we've been really trying to push the video side of things, especially, as today you can see we have our guest over here on the side. And before I'm going to introduce my guest, last night I'm on the phone call with one of my good friends, and he's telling me a little bit about his story, and he starts bringing up, I used to listen to this podcast called the Psychedelic Salon with host Lorenzo Hagerty, and I said, hold on a sec, dude, did you really just say that? I said, and I didn't let him know about this, but I said, I'm literally interviewing Lorenzo tomorrow. And we both just freaked out. I mean, both of us like electrocuted with that kind of synchronicity. Like, out of all the things he could have said, he brings up Lorenzo. And I want to just kind of read a little bio for you, Lorenzo, because you are a man of many accomplishments. So, there's only so much that one person can accomplish in a lifetime, and Lorenzo Hagerty is a man who's accomplished several lifetimes of accomplishments in just his 74 years on Earth. He's worked as an electrical engineer, got his law degree, worked as a stuntman, was an executive officer in the Navy, became a pioneer of personal computing in the late 70s, even before Apple and IBM, later became president of Success Incorporated, then became an IT guru at GTE, which became Verizon, after which he became an author of several books, started the Palenque Norte discussion series at Burning Man, and then became and this is how I discovered him, is through the creation of the original, the OG of all psychedelic podcasts, the Psychedelic Salon, that features a lot of rare lectures from the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Terence McKenna. And all of this while being the father of 3 children and now, 5 grandchildren. Lorenzo, welcome to the show, my friend. Goodness gracious. Did I leave anything out?
You just described somebody who never figured out what he wanted to do and never had a career path.
Which, to be honest with you, for young people listening, we can all relate because we're all a bunch of, ADD schizophrenics when it comes to our interests. We want to do 100 things all at once, and why not, right? I mean, I guess you're a guy who's kind of shown that, hey, it's possible. You can be a lawyer, an engineer, a psychedelic podcast guy. You can be you can do everything, and you've shown that. And I thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, that too often we go to college and we have to pay off our debt, and so we get our job, and at that job we meet the woman that we marry, and then we have kids, and we never get to do what we really wanted to do. And it's scary from time to time, leaving a job and security and stuff like that. And so I'm a little older than most people who listen to your podcast, but that seems to be a new trend that I might have done it early on, but I see a lot of people now not getting locked into a single profession.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And why not? There's so much flavor to life. I think this idea of spending 50 years in one thing, just because that was always the way it was done, it's an old paradigm that's, I think, now shifting, and I think we're starting to see a new way of doing things.
Yeah, I was raised, my dad was, World War II vet and all, and his advice was, you find a good company and you go to work for them and that's where you stay. But, that doesn't work anymore. Companies don't even keep anybody for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So the whole paradigm has changed, and I think you have to be kind of light on your feet. But now there are so many more options for people because of the internet. People can, you're not going to become mega wealthy. A few people do, but the whole thing is you can work for yourself and you don't have to get locked down to a cubicle.
Amen. It's enabling whole lifestyle changes for people. It's enabling parents to be with their children more. It's enabling, so many different types of unique businesses and opportunities and less strain on our environment as well. If people aren't having to drive in 30 minutes into town to sit in their cubicle and then come back, I mean, again, that's less of an impact on the environment. So it's all around. It's beautiful what's happening. I think so. You've been someone who's truly witnessed the technological revolution of the last, 30, 40 years. And especially when it comes to the internet, I mean, what is there any way that you can summarize to future generations what it was like before to now, and like what's really taken place? You know, beyond all the details of, well, first this happened, then this happened, but like, what has it meant for humankind to go through this process?
Well, from my personal perspective, it just blows me away that you and I are having this video conversation, and we're in different states, and it's not costing anything either. It's just totally blows my mind. When I was growing up in the 40s, actually, in a city just the edge of Chicago, my biggest technological dream was one day I might be able to, somebody would invent the Dick Tracy two-way wrist radio, which was the leading edge of future tech at the time. And look where we come, and well, I started a computer company in, I think, 1972. And just to give you some perspective about what we have in technology today, my first PC that I sold under the Dynasty Computer Corporation brand was a 16K RAM. It had a 12-inch black and white monitor and a cassette tape recorder for I/O. They hadn't invented the floppy disk for small computers yet. Those sold for $3,000 each, and I sold over 1,000 of them. It was just amazing. And that tech was nothing, and parents would say, well, why should I buy this? This is pretty expensive just to keep recipes on, which was the main thing they were doing then. And I said, there's no good reason to buy it, except if you don't, your kids are going to be left behind. And that has proven true, that young people today are the ones that are really driving the technology. A friend of mine, I don't have a cell phone myself because I have a phone phobia, but I do have a iPhone 4 that a friend gave me when she upgraded to a 5. And the first day I had it, I was over at my granddaughter's house, and she was just a few weeks before her 4th birthday, and she wanted to see a little app. And I said, oh, I think there's an app store, or something. I think there's a way to get that. And she said, let me see that. And I give her the phone, and she does a few clicks, and all of a sudden she says, there, all you have to do is put in your password. Don't worry, it's free, and it'll download. Well, I wasn't as blown away with her as I was with the interface and the technology that a 4-year-old can intuitively run these devices. And when I was the internet evangelist for, what's now Verizon. And I had the best job I ever had. I just got to travel around the world giving speeches about how great the internet was going to be one day. And mainly trying to talk high-level executives into putting money into the internet. The middle executives, who are more my age, got it. But the older people really didn't get it at first. And so, it's to me, one of our dreams in the early days when we were, at the Java 1, the first time they had a Java conference. I remember, what was his name? The head of Sun, Scott somebody. He said that what our hope is one day the internet will be just like electricity. You use it all the time, but you don't even think about using it. And that was in the days when you still had a dial tone and a dial-up modem, and you had to sign in and all that. And today, we have connected here today, but I bet until just now, neither of us really thought about the fact that we're using the internet. And that is a huge change. But quite frankly, I can't get my head around the orders of magnitude of change that have taken place just in the last really 20 years. The iPhone's only 10 years old. And that has so revolutionized things in not all good ways. I go to the park with my granddaughters and see parents looking down at their hands all the time instead of watching their kids play. But all in all, the internet is the lever that is going to give us common people a chance to really make the world the way it should be. The way, I'm not saying that we have any right answers, but we're all trying to live a little better, live a little greener, trying to be a little nicer to one another. And that doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up. Yeah, and the internet has really enabled, actually, let me just, one more little diversion. When we were first rolling out the net, the biggest complaint was poor people are going to be left behind. But with the invention of the smartphone, now there are more people in the so-called underdeveloped world that have internet connections probably than in America. So it has leveled out quite a bit. And I think that's a big difference, a big changer over what happened in the 60s, say.
Yeah, Terence McKenna he had this this analogy of the military wagon driving through the town, and the internet accidentally fell out of the back of the truck, and the peasants got it and ran away with it, and then took the technology, and literally it's been the key to our freedom, in a sense, real freedom. Right. Speaking of freedom, you've made such an impact on my own life in terms of what you've done with the Psychedelic Salon. You're one of those guys who's inspired me to even start my own media company and start creating our own content. And it started with a podcast and it's turned now into video and interviews, all going to events and so on and so forth. But the idea, and a lot of these events that we're going to are festivals that are also inspired by the use of entheogenic medicines. And Terence McKenna, who's really truly was probably the greatest spokesman for psychedelics, especially in an era where it was so outlawed and so shunned, and so I can't even imagine what it was like back then. I mean, it's already a topic that we can't discuss really overly openly with all parts of the population. Where did your journey with psychedelics begin, and why has it made such an impact on you that it's really become one of your life's missions to get this knowledge and truth out there?
Well, I'll make this kind of brief because there's a 30-minute interview on my psychedelicsalon.com website that says "Confessions of an Ecstasy Advocate."
That's right.
That's the full story. But basically, I was in Dallas, Texas, excuse me, running my computer company, and excuse me, a friend of mine, a lawyer in Biloxi, Mississippi, called me and he says, "Hey, have you heard about ecstasy?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And he says, "Well, it's a new drug and it's legal, but see if you can find out about it, because I hear Dallas is ground zero." Well, long story short, if it hadn't been legal, I never would have even followed through, because at that point in time, I was 42 years old. I'd never even smoked pot. Never had alcohol was my drug of choice, alcohol and caffeine and sugar. But so I found out, long story short, I made the connection. I tried MDMA for the first time, and it took me back to sort of my childhood dreams. It made me remember who I really was at my core. And that substance, had it been illegal, I never would have tried it. But I tried it, and it opened up so many avenues for me. Of course, then they made it illegal, but by then I'd become a distributor, and I needed the income, so I kept doing it. Finally, I had to escape to Florida, get out of Texas. But it was over a year later before I even tried cannabis for the first time, and like 2 years later before I tried LSD. But once I started, and I made a few contacts, then I really got involved in using these substances. And of course, in Dallas, we had a thing called the Start Club. And it was really the in place, not for people like me normally. It was for the fast crowd. Madonna actually moved to Dallas to be closer to the Start Club. That's how big it was at the time. And it was, they played what they called Start music, which migrated to Chicago, became house music, and then went to England and became rave music.
Wow. And
so I was essentially going to what the precursor of raves back in those days in Dallas in around 84, 85. So it was that, when you dance all night on MDMA to electronic music, it opens up some connections that you didn't realize were there. And long story short, I went overboard because I didn't have any peers. None of my friends were in this, and so I've tried everything, and And I've never tried heroin, never tried crack, because I've had two close friends that have advised me against it. They got hooked on those. But I've used many things. And before 9/11, we had a little group that were working our way through Sasha's book and trying a different thing every 2 weeks. And so,
Wow.
I've had a lot of experience. When I wrote The Spirit of the Internet, I was microdosing on LSD for that 6-month period that I finally got it. And so basically, like everything in my life, I kind of go overboard. And I did that for a while. And I had a few close calls, and I've had a few friends that died from using substances the wrong way, almost always with alcohol and water involved. So, it's been a learning curve. And the Psychedelic Salon has turned into sort of a, just say no, KNOW, and it's more about philosophy really than drugs. Although Terence McKenna, he got his start in the 80s, the early 80s, when you couldn't say the word psychedelic without looking over your shoulder. And 12 years ago, when I started the salon, I almost called it something other than the Psychedelic Salon, because the word psychedelic was still pretty toxic. But a good friend of mine who is gay said, they took queer away from us, but we had to take it back. And you can call it whatever you want, and they're going to take it away from you. So why don't you just jump in right away? And now, of course, there's so much research worldwide in psychedelics, and microdosing is even making mainstream press now. So things have changed dramatically in the last 12 years, and I think they're just constantly getting better.
What would you say to someone who is unaware of the benefits of these for the most part plant medicines? Some are considered for me sacred chemicals even, and again, there's another side of this whole world that's completely destructive and terrible, which you've seen. They've lumped them all under one category called drugs. And said they're all in the same family, and it's like, I suppose they alter your consciousness, but they don't all alter you in positive ways. What would you say though to someone who's on maybe on the fence, or just someone who's unknowing? Like, there's a lot of my friends who can't even share their experiences with their families because their families are still under that that false programming, that psilocybin mushrooms will fry your brain and you'll start doing crazy things and you should be locked up in jail because of it. What would you say to someone like who's under that false programming? How would you describe what psychedelics are, and how to look at them in a different light?
Well, things have actually changed so much today that the biggest drug problem is with prescription opiates. And so the first thing I'd say is, not all drugs are equal. And definitely I would stay away from the opioids. I've used them. I've never liked them. I've only used them a few times because to me, they just numb your brain and nothing happens. Whereas the psychedelics, the definition of a psychedelic is mind manifesting or soul manifesting. Actually, soul manifesting is what they first thought they would use, and then they thought in the 50s that was too toxic, so they said mind. But what it does is psychedelics, they tear down barriers, cultural barriers, so that you're able to think outside the box. I know you were raised in a pretty restrictive religion, and I was too. I was a Catholic, and I couldn't get out of that box that I was put in as a child for the longest time. Because by the time you're 6 years old, a lot of your brain patterns are pretty well established. And so you have to work hard to get out of that. But as far as using these substances, I always tell people, you don't want to try them unless you're just totally compelled to do it. You just feel like you really need to. And my example for me there was LSD. I had some, a guy gave it to me, and I held it for over a year before I tried it. Finally, I talked to my ex-wife. I was married to a different woman at the time, and we talked over it, and I was halfway. Well, I was very apprehensive. I thought that there was a chance I would take this and I would never come back. I would lose my mind, just like all of the press. But
we've all been there, man.
So many friends by then that were had excellent results with it, that I decided, well, I'm going to take a chance, and if it fries my mind, well, that's the end of my life, And it turned out it was really the beginning of the next phase of my life. So you want to really, you don't want to be talked into it, and you don't want to do any of these things unless you're really compelled to. And if you do want to test the waters, I don't know how to find safe MDMA now. When I first started, it was called ecstasy, and it was pure MDMA, and we knew who the chemist was and all like that. So it's really dangerous today because the source is questionable usually. And most, according to Arrowwood samples that they've tested, most what's called ecstasy or Molly today is really, it's got a lot of amphetamine in it. It's not pure MDMA. Pure MDMA, as being used by Michael and Annie Mithofer in South Carolina, they're now starting a phase 3 study, a large study with MDMA and for alleviating PTSD. And
wow.
Excuse me, from my perspective, it was the one that kind of got me into things. And it's also what I would recommend anybody start with. It's not a psychedelic. That's the whole thing. Everybody that I've been with that did it for the first time, their first comment almost was, wow, I felt like this before. And that, if done right in the right setting, not at a dance, and I've danced all night on it, and it's great, but in a group of 2 to 4 people, it can be just magical. And, that's why they call it the love drug. And, it's an empathogen more than an entheogen. But it's a good starting place if somebody really wants to test the waters, or probably an even better starting place, because it's legal so many places now, is cannabis, marijuana. It in large doses can get you very psychedelic, but at least it can get somebody over that hump of, oh, it's a drug, And first time I smoked pot, I thought I was going to, go reefer madness crazy. I was, subjected to all the same stuff you guys were too. And you have to overcome some of those fears. But once you become an experienced psychonaut, then you become even more fearful, I think.
I know.
Before you do things.
More respect.
Like Terence says, if you're not really scared before you go into an ayahuasca session, you haven't prepared properly.
Where, what is that next level that psilocybin or ayahuasca takes someone that, cannabis and, ecstasy or whatever however you'd want to rank those substances, like where do you think it takes you that those other ones don't take you? What is the difference between, did you say empathic to entheogenic? Had you say that?
Yeah, you have more empathy on MDMA,
yeah, right?
And you don't really get psychedelic.
Yeah,
it's actually more of a speed in a way. It's that same family. But, they're all different, like LSD. And this, you don't want to take this as gospel, so to speak, because it's different for everybody. But in general, this is how it was for me. And I've had a lot of friends say similar things. LSD is more of a mechanical, more machine-like almost, in that I did microdoses of LSD for 6 months while I was doing the final edit on the Spirit of the Internet. And a lot of people in Silicon Valley have been doing microdoses for decades now. The internet is running on acid. If everybody had took acid in the last year, quit and didn't go to work for a month, the internet would shut down. I mean, that's how pervasive it is. Yeah. But so that's LSD. Now, ayahuasca is very earth-centered for me. I get very ecologically minded and thinking about more practical aspects of my life. Mushrooms to me are more cosmic. And then there, DMT is what you get in ayahuasca when you ingest it. But if you smoke DMT, that's another whole level that I I don't even know how to describe that sometimes. But they all take you to different places. But what is happening is your mind is free to roam without the normal cultural barriers that you come into the experience with. So that for me with ayahuasca, a lot of people like the first part of it, the first couple hours with the wild visions and everything. To me, that's uncomfortable. I can't wait till the vision part gets over. And then you think you're down to baseline, unless you try to stand up and you realize you really can't stand. But your head is so clear. Yeah. And that's where all of these thoughts come in. And I always go in with an intention, but usually something else takes over. And I've learned so much. I've conquered fear. I've worked out my loss of my mother and things like that on ayahuasca. And on mushrooms, mushrooms have taken me cosmically and given me ideas for books. But the whole thing about the psychedelic experience is for me at least, is not the time that you're under the influence of these substances, but in the hours and days afterwards. Ayahuasca is not unusual for a month later to have an aha moment come out of it. So basically, it's just a lubricant for your mind, I think, is maybe an easy way to say it.
Yeah, well said. And one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that, there aren't, at least I have never met, and, you've been around more than me. I mean, have you met people who've abused psilocybin, for example? I mean, is it really a substance that you can really be using on a daily basis? I've never met anyone who even has the desire to abuse it in the way that, like opiates are used. Right. Where it's a daily thing that's, got you in shackles. Mushrooms work a different way. It's not something that maybe you use them frequently in the beginning, but then as time goes on, like you said, a more experienced psychonaut, it probably takes that application time after your experience. Sometimes it may take months to just process what the heck happened, what you've experienced, and to apply that to your life before it's time to go back in a sense. It might be years for some.
Right. I can't imagine anybody abusing mushrooms.
No.
When I did it, what I thought was frequently, that would be probably once, maybe every 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something like that. And what I did when I was really, and I haven't done mushroom, I actually haven't done anything except cannabis for several years now. Part of it is getting older, you have to worry about, heart accelerating and stuff. But when I did a lot of mushrooms, I took a tape recorder in with me and I recorded my thoughts. Just, little absurd things that if anybody else listened to it, it wouldn't make any sense at all. But I can actually recall some of the visuals I had. I've got hours and hours of mushroom tapes.
Wow.
That I haven't listened to in several years, but every time I get one out, all of a sudden, I get more aha moments. So I don't think you can abuse mushrooms. I don't think you can abuse ayahuasca. LSD, LSD is kind of funny because after the first, if you take it 2 days in a row, the second day, you don't really get the physical sensation so much. And especially if you're microdosing, 25, 50 mics. But the second and third day, fourth day, et cetera, you don't have all of that physical stuff, but your mind is out there. So I know when I was programming, I used to use it because I could keep 3 or 4 subroutines in my mind all at the same time. Is that abusing it? I don't know. If you're really abusing it, you're not getting a buzz out of it. You're getting a lot of mind focus, I guess. But I guess that's the closest I would come to say I abused something. But I never felt like it was abuse because, when I stopped, I stopped. I just, I didn't need it anymore. I wasn't on that big pressure schedule. And so I just stopped and there's no withdrawal or anything like that. Opiates are a totally different ball game, I think.
Yeah, totally different. And it's important to be able to distinguish between, educate yourself. Educate yourself. If you're unaware of this, then just educate yourself. If there's reasonable people in your life telling you that maybe we've been wrong about this, that we've been brainwashed about this, if you have reasonable people in your life that are telling you this, maybe there's something there, and maybe it's time to just educate yourself and see what's beyond the curtain of ignorance that you so often that we want to keep in our lives. It's like voluntary ignorance. We just choose I just want to keep going under the same story, throw them in jail. And we're at a time period in I think human history where it's really we can no longer afford to just tolerate ignorance and let it keep permeating. The truth of all things must be tested, as McKenna said, and it must be, let's just find the truth. We don't have to be attached to any results. It doesn't mean, we don't know, we haven't had that many years of our culture even using psychedelics on a larger scale. I mean, it's been kind of a micro community, and now it's getting larger, but we still don't have, what's it like when generations have had, ceremonial usage of psychedelics? What if that comes into play? I mean, McKenna talks about even just these collective experiences that we're having, where it's like everyone who's having these entheogenic experiences is one experience in many, and as a collective humanity, what is the psychedelic experience? And we're figuring that out, as it's reemerging onto the scene. And let us not forget that it's been a part of human culture, and it's a very big part of human culture for probably most of our existence. It's probably only been a shorter time that it's not been a part. And it's, for you, Lorenzo, where do you see us going in terms of ending this prohibition in the United States and in the world? I mean, are we getting closer? How you think we're around the corner? I mean, cannabis has already taken place. It's being free in different states. Where are we going with some of the other entheogenic plants?
Well, you bring up several issues here. One, circling back to what you were talking about, getting education about these plants and all. When somebody asks me should I do this, should I do that? My advice is the first thing you do is go to erowid.org, EROWID.org, and look up the substance that you're interested in, and then read the bad trip reports, the ones where people have really problems with it. And if you can't handle something like that, then move on to some other substance.
Yeah, that's true.
But it can be a good trip. So that's step one. Now, the other thing that we're missing now, and we've been missing this for about 2,000 years, but before that, there was entheogens were part of most all cultures, and they religions grew out of them. So what we don't have now, that we're trying to learn how to do, is a culture where we can bring our younger people into the fold, more or less, safely, and educate them, and slowly. And Huxley, Aldous Huxley, always believed that his greatest book was Island, and I think that's so. It talks about how that certain times during a person's life they would have a psychedelic experience, and that's the kind of thing I think we are lacking on a large scale. Although on a small scale, it's very encouraging to see how many older people are bringing the younger ones in. I've had a wonderful opportunity to take a couple of my children on their first psychedelic experience.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And you want to talk about a way for a family to bind, it's just awesome. So that's something that's coming around now. As far as ending prohibition and all, I didn't smoke cannabis even for a year after I was doing MDMA, because at the time in Texas, you're getting 30 years to life for a single joint.
Jeez.
And so now take that. That wasn't that long ago. That was say 1984. And on the 20th of this month in Washington, D.C. at the inaugural, they're going to give away 4,200 free joints to have everybody light up at the inauguration, because it's legal in D.C.
That's right.
It's legal to give. You can't sell it, but you can give it. So they're giving away, and at 4 minutes and 20 seconds into his speech, everybody's going to light up. So this is open and obvious and advertised. I couldn't even talk about it in '84. So, again, it's coming from the ground up, and we'll have a few setbacks now. I think for the next few years, it's going to be, we've taken one step forward or two steps forward. We're going to take one step back now, but the genie is out of the bottle, and it took Charlie Grobe 8 years to get approval to do his psilocybin end of life study, and my wife was his research nurse on that study.
No
Took
way.
him 8 years to get that approved. And now things are going through the FDA and much, much faster because of the generational shift. Even at the DEA, which is just, horrendous, the people at the mid-level inside the DEA know that these substances are harmless and that cannabis is medicinal. And so it's just a generational thing that I think we're going to burn out here right now in the next 4 years with all of the hysteria and everything. But you can't turn back the time. There's just too many young people have been to raves and festivals. And everybody smokes grass now. Everybody was smoking it before, but nobody could admit it.
Lorenzo, I know you've, like you said, you've kind of almost discovered this later in life, but you were still around during the counterculture movement of the 60s, and you still have a perspective of it, and now have, different perspective, even maybe on it now as you get older. Just as you get further away from it, you see its impact or whatever. What do you think the difference is between the counterculture movement of the 60s and the one that's taking place right now on the planet?
Well, when they talk about the 60s, they talk about Woodstock and the acid tests and all. But for me, I was practicing law in Texas at the time, and I hadn't used any of the substances. To me, the 60s had very little to do with psychedelics or any kind of drugs. To me, the 60s were the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement. Those two went hand in hand, and they were huge. I came back from Vietnam. I was still in the Navy Reserve, and one Memorial Day, we all had to march in a parade. Well, after the parade, a whole bunch of us ducked into a public bathroom, changed clothes into civilian clothes, went down to the federal courthouse and threw our medals on the steps. So to me, the anti-war movement was the big thing. And the civil rights movement for me was to a lesser degree because I was in a position to be involved in that as much. But today you have Black Lives Matter, and I think that's one of the very important. And it's sort of like Occupy movement. It's a leaderless.
Right.
It's state of mind, like the United States is. I want to go to America. People say, well, what they want is the state of mind where you can be more free to speak and start a business, whatever. So I think that the 60s are going to pale in comparison to what we're heading into right now. I think that we're really I looked at your website and watched some of the videos, and you guys are right on target there. We are the heroes of our own stories.
Thanks,
and we're
man.
real. And we're going to write stories that are going to be fun to read.
Oh yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think we're living in the one of the most amazing times ever to have lived, maybe the most. And again, it's all a continuation of what's already happened. I mean, it's all one big story. It's not like one time ends and another begins, in a sense. I mean, without what took place in the 60s and 70s, this wouldn't be possible. It's like all the pioneers who were arrested for talking about psychedelics, for smoking a joint. I went to the Cannabis Cup in Denver, Colorado 2 years ago, and the man who announced the winner of the best strand of the year, whatever, he was the guy who had served the most prison time ever for cannabis, and it was like 33 years or something like that. And it's like, to look at this guy and just be like, just for growing a plant, man, he went away for it. And there's so many people though who've really carried the pendulum forward, of protecting the truth at all costs for their own personal safety, physical safety. Thank goodness for the most part, right now, at least currently, this generation hasn't been asked to put their lives on the line like in past generations, but we've continued, and a lot of that's because it's a safer place now. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think that the controlling hand, or whatever you want to call it, that's been controlling this planet for so long, those corporate interests, those those people. I think their grip has been loosening, if you ask me. And I think it's because so many of us have gotten the truth through the internet, through podcasts like yours, Lorenzo. I mean, I can't tell you what those podcasts have done for so many people. And I mean, me and my friend, we were talking last night. He said he would mow his lawn, listening to the Psychedelic Salon, and I would used to drive around visiting my properties for my corporate job and listening to the Psychedelic Salon, and just literally changing the molecules in my mind, and the way my perception and my paradigm literally changing right then and there, because someone like you was brave enough to, and just was hardworking enough, to actually just sit and put it together with no, immediate reward coming your way. It's not like you've become rich on this or anything like that. It's been a labor of love, right?
Yeah, I never planned to still be podcasting. Actually, I only planned to do one, because I'm a geek. I like the technology. I want to see how it worked. And so I did the one. I thought, well, that didn't work too good. And so I did a couple more, and then all of a sudden I found out people were listening to it, and it just kind of took over, and it's, as long as I keep it a hobby, I haven't made it a business, or I haven't made it my life. It's something I do. I've been a couple of weeks without a podcast now, and I'm almost feeling guilty about it. But
I know that feeling.
Grandkids, you got to do other things. But it's something that if it's fun to do and it's a nice hobby and it helps other people, that's extra bonus. But for me, I like listening to these things, so I might as well just put them out there. I like telling people about them. And it's not like a big plan of any kind, but it has put me in touch with a lot of people I wouldn't have met otherwise. People like you, and it's so encouraging to see people 1 or 2 generations behind me who are mentally 1 or 2 generations ahead of me already, because they didn't have to unload so much baggage. Yeah. And I agree. We're at just I think this is, well, it's the most amazing time in human history that I'm aware of. And I read a lot of history. I think that this country, since 1963, there was a coup in 63, and the deep state took over. And the deep state, you can read all about it. But what is happening right now is it's not just like one set of oligarchs that are running things. A new set of oligarchs are coming in, and these guys have been doing business with Russia, and the old guys have been doing war with Russia. They're making money off war. The other ones are making off of trade. So we're going to see some kind of a big shift. I don't know if it'd be good or bad, but from my perspective, I'm so happy that I'm alive today, and I'm not old in the 50s when the Eisenhower years, which were really boring. Here I am, an old man that gets to watch the fireworks of a Trump presidency, and it's so beyond the imagination of what's going on that we just have to strap ourselves in. And in my opinion, over the next decade, say, it's the worldwide psychedelic community who are going to hold things together, because we're used to having experiences where everything gets out of control and all wild and all. But we can be steady. We say, we're just having a trip. It's going to be over. Yeah, well said. After the day after the election, I had friends who were suicidal because of the election, and they had forgotten about all the history that we've been through and all. If you want to be suicidal, go back into the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we came within hours of starting a nuclear war, and accidentally it could have happened very easily. So we've had much tougher times than we do right now, but I don't think we've had any more interesting times. I think the Chinese curse, "May you live in interesting times," has come true for the world.
Man, my advice to anyone is when you watch this story that's taking place, the big story, the geopolitical thing, the world leaders, and so on and so forth, is to just only look at it, enjoy it, but at the same, and you can get upset about it too, but you can only control what you can control, and make sure that whatever stress you're taking on from watching this story, that it's only within the same barometer of the level of control that you have too. At the end of the day, this is happening no matter what you think or whatever you want, whatever you think you're going to do. Just keep living your life. The best thing we can do is to keep living our lives, find love wherever we can, find compassion for those around us. Let's help each other, those who are in our physical life. If someone needs food, let's get them some food. If someone needs clean water, let's work on that, whatever it be. Let's then keep living the dreams that we see manifesting through ourselves, and let that story take care of itself, And if you're called upon to play a part in that big story, great. But until then, just get busy living your life and watch it and with just amazement, because it is fascinating. And at the end of the day, no matter what people think of Donald Trump, the idea that people are just sick and tired of this status quo, even if it's represented in a guy like Donald Trump, the fact that people are wanting something different that's not a part of the existing system, the existing paradigm, even if Donald Trump's a big liar like the rest of them, at least people are voting for someone under the pretense that it's something new and different and unique, and we need change, and we've been lied to, and so on and so forth. And that's, to me, that's a plus. I'm excited to see that. And I know that there's a part of the Trump movement that's shadowed in bigotry and small-minded thinking, and there's definitely those people involved in that too. But there's some good people too that are, I think, just looking for something different. And whether they get it or not with Donald doesn't matter. But I hope if they don't get it with him, that we continue to hold every one of those guys accountable for what that they're doing, because at the end of the day, if we can get a shift to take place at the top levels of this planet, we could create change very quickly, very quickly. Poverty could be eliminated within a year. There wouldn't even be poverty on this planet if we so chose. If we could get the maniacs to change their minds, what they're doing. We're never going to get them to change. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think this is a revolution that starts from the bottom. It's not some leader at the top who's rallying the troops. It's literally each of the troops is turning on the light within themselves, is finding their own, divine purpose, whatever that means. That's for you to find out, and to create this new paradigm that I think so many of us can feel, so many of us can visualize, so many of us are even living already, people that are already living the solutions. And thank goodness, man. And people like you, Lorenzo, and I really want to thank you for coming on and taking time out of your busy day to talk with me, and talk to one of your fans at the end of the day. I mean, really, you do have a lot of people who look up to you and are really grateful for the work that you've done. And we've spoken mostly about your participation in the Psychedelic Salon, but there's so many other things you've been involved in, and so many people you've affected over the years. And I just want to say thank you, and for all those who are listening, who've been thinking this in their mind, yeah, that Lorenzo guy, thank you, man, for doing that. Well, I'm speaking on behalf of them. So the guy's mowing his lawn, the guy driving the U-Haul truck, listening to this, or, yeah, man, thank you. So thank you so much, brother.
You're all welcome, and the pleasure, quite frankly, is really all mine.
There he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lorenzo Hagerty. Thank you, Lorenzo.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.